I'll never forget the sound of my alarm clock on May 15th, 2019. Not because it was my college graduation day, though that should have been enough, but because of what I was about to discover when I walked downstairs that morning. The sound that still haunts me wasn't the alarm. It was my mother's laughter, pure and delighted, echoing from the kitchen while she looked at something on her phone. My name is Sarah Chin Martinez, and for 22 years, I believe my parents loved me. I believe that hard work, straight A's, and being the responsible daughter would earn me the same treatment as my younger sister, Mia. I was wrong, dead wrong. And that morning, I was about to find out just how wrong I'd been my entire life. But before I tell you what I discovered, something so shocking it made me question everything I thought I knew about family, I need you to do something. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child, like you were giving your all while watching someone else get everything handed to them, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to tell you will make you feel less alone. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the only way to heal is to take back your power. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I padded downstairs in my pajamas, expecting to find Mom making her usual Tuesday morning coffee, maybe asking if I was nervous about walking across that stage later. Instead, I found her and Dad huddled around Dad's laptop, grinning like they'd won the lottery. The morning light streaming through our kitchen window caught the excitement in their eyes, an excitement I hadn't seen directed toward anything involving me in. Well, maybe ever. Morning, I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot they'd somehow forgotten to offer me. Big day, right? Mom looked up, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone so fast I almost missed it. Oh, Sarah. Yes, of course. Graduation. She said it like she'd forgotten, which sent the first cold spike through my chest. Are you ready? Ready? I'd been ready for months. I'd ordered my cap and gown, arranged for my transcripts, written thank you cards for my professors. I'd been planning this day since freshman year, working 3 jobs to pay for school while living at home to save money. Every paper, every exam, every late night studying, it was all for this moment. Their daughter was about to graduate summa cum laude from UC San Diego with a degree in biomedical engineering. I think so, I said carefully. Just need to figure out transportation. I was hoping. About that, Dad interrupted, not even looking up from the screen. We can't drive you today. Something came up. Something came up. On my graduation day, something came up. The coffee mug suddenly felt heavy in my hands. What do you mean something came up? That's when Mom turned the laptop toward me, and I saw what had them so mesmerized. A car configurator website. Not just any car, a brand new Tesla Model 3, midnight silver with every upgrade possible. Premium sound system, enhanced autopilot, custom interior. The price at the bottom made my stomach drop. $58,000. We're picking up Mia's graduation gift today, Mom said, her voice bright with excitement. Isn't it gorgeous? She's been wanting one ever since she got into USC. Let me paint you the full picture of this moment, because the details matter. Mia was 18, a high school senior who'd been accepted to USC. Not because of her grades, which were barely above average, but because my parents had paid for SAT tutors, college consultants, and what I strongly suspected were some very generous donations to the alumni fund. She'd never worked a day in her life. She'd never even gotten her driver's license until 3 months ago, because it was too stressful for her to learn while focusing on school. Meanwhile, I was standing there in pajamas I'd bought with money from my campus job, looking at my parents spending almost $60,000 on a car for my sister's high school graduation, while telling me they couldn't drive me 20 miles to receive my college diploma. Wait, I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. You're buying me a Tesla for graduating high school, but you can't drive me to my college graduation? Dad finally looked up, and I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. Impatience. Like I was being unreasonable for asking. Sarah, you're an adult. You can figure out transportation. Mia's just a kid, and this is a big milestone for her. Besides, he added, looking back at the screen, you've always been so independent. You don't need us to hold your hand. Independent. Right. That was their code word for we've decided you don't matter as much. But here's what really broke something inside me. It wasn't just about the car, or even about them missing my graduation. It was the look on their faces. Pure joy. Unfiltered excitement about doing something special for my sister, while treating my achievement like an inconvenience in their schedule. I thought about all the times I'd convinced myself that their different treatment of us was justified. Mia was the baby, the artistic one, the one who needed more support. I was the smart one, the responsible one, the one who could handle things on her own. I'd swallowed that narrative for years, even when it meant working 20-hour weeks while maintaining a 3.98 GPA. Even when it meant watching them pay for Mia's art classes, dance lessons, and designer clothes while I shopped at thrift stores. How much did my graduation gift cost? I asked quietly. They exchanged a look. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Honey, you don't need a car. You have that nice bicycle, and you're so environmentally conscious. How much, Mom? Another look between them. Dad cleared his throat. We got you that nice planner for college. The leather one. It was a good planner. $23. I knew because I'd seen the Amazon receipt on Dad's desk 3 years ago when I was still a freshman. They'd spent $23 on my high school graduation gift and were about to spend $60,000 on Mia's. And now they were too busy picking up her gift to attend my college graduation. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I stared at that Tesla configurator screen, at the excited expressions on their faces, at the complete absence of any awareness of what they were doing to me. So I should take the bus, I said, to my own graduation. Oh, don't be dramatic, Mom said, waving her hand. It's just transportation. The important thing is that you're achieving your goals. Dramatic. 22 years old, about to graduate with honors from one of the top engineering programs in the country, asking my parents for a ride to the ceremony. And I was being dramatic. That's when something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, more calculating. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. I saw the way Dad's attention was already drifting back to the screen, eager to get back to planning me a surprise. I saw the way Mom was checking her phone, probably texting Mia about the car. I saw two people who had made their choice about which daughter mattered, and it wasn't me. You know what? I said, setting my coffee mug down with careful precision. You're absolutely right. I can figure it out myself. I always have. I turned to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me. Sarah, we'll try to make it to the ceremony if we finish with the car stuff early enough. It's at 3, right? I didn't trust my voice to stay steady, so I just nodded and headed back upstairs. But as I climbed those steps, I heard Mom whisper to Dad, "Do you think we should have?" "She's fine," Dad whispered back. "Sarah's always fine. She doesn't need the same kind of support Mia does." If you've ever been in that moment where you realize the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally have been keeping a scorecard you didn't even know existed, you know what happened to me in that instant. Something broke. But something else, something I didn't even know was there, started to grow. I sat on my bed, staring at my cap and gown hanging on my closet door, and I made a decision. I was going to my graduation. I was going to walk across that stage and accept my diploma with honors. And my parents were going to be there to see it. They just didn't know it yet. The bus ride to campus that morning was the longest 45 minutes of my life. I sat in the back, still in shock, watching San Diego blur past the window while my mind raced through 22 years of memories I was suddenly seeing in a completely different light. Like the time when I was 8 and Mia was 5, and we both got sick with the flu. Mom took 3 days off work to care for Mia, bringing her soup, reading her stories, setting up a little bed on the couch so she could watch movies all day. When I asked for the same treatment, Mom told me I was old enough to rest by myself and gave me a bottle of children's Tylenol. I spent those 3 days alone in my room, listening to Mom fuss over Mia downstairs, telling myself it was because I was the big kid who didn't need as much attention. Or when I was 16 and made varsity volleyball as a sophomore, something that had never happened at our school before. I was so excited to tell my parents. I ran into the house with the letter, shouting about how I'd made the team, how Coach said I had real potential. Dad looked up from his newspaper just long enough to say, "That's nice, honey." 20 minutes later, Mia came home with a B+ on a history test, her first B+ in months, and suddenly there were celebration milkshakes and a trip to Target for congratulations shopping. I'd spent years explaining away moments like these, making excuses, telling myself that parents show love differently, that Mia needed more support, that I was just more independent by nature. But sitting on that bus, watching normal families go about their normal day, I realized I'd been gaslighting myself for decades. The worst part? I was good at it. I was so good at being the low-maintenance daughter that my parents had started taking my invisibility for granted. When was the last time they'd asked about my life? My friends? My dreams? When was the last time they'd shown up for something that mattered to me without me having to beg? By the time I got to campus, something had crystallized inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. But more than that, I was strategic. I had 4 hours before the ceremony. 4 hours to make sure my parents understood exactly what they'd chosen when they decided Tesla shopping was more important than their daughter's college graduation. First stop, the registrar's office. I'd worked there part-time for 2 years, filing transcripts and answering phones. The staff knew me, trusted me. More importantly, they had access to things like ceremony programs and seating charts. Sarah, Mrs. Rodriguez, the head registrar, beamed when she saw me. "Big day. Are you excited?" "Terrified," I admitted, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something. My parents are coming, but there's been some confusion about where they're supposed to sit." It took 20 minutes to convince Mrs. Rodriguez that my parents needed special seating. Front row, center section, with a clear view of the stage. I explained that my father had vision problems, a lie, and my mother had difficulty walking long distances, another lie, so they'd need to be as close as possible. Mrs. Rodriguez, sweet woman that she was, personally walked me over to the ceremony coordinator to make sure everything was arranged. "Don't you worry about a thing," she said, patting my shoulder. "Your parents will have the best seats in the house." Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 required a trip to the communications department, where I'd done an internship the previous summer. I found Professor Chun, no relation, despite the name, in his office, grading final exams. "Sarah, congratulations on summa cum laude. That biomedical engineering program is no joke." "Thank you, Professor. Actually, I was wondering if I could ask a favor. I know you have connections with the local news stations. It turns out that a 22-year-old graduating summa cum laude from a program with less than a 10% female enrollment was exactly the kind of feel-good story the local news loved, especially when that student had worked multiple jobs to pay her own way through school. Professor Chun made some calls, and within an hour, I had commitments from 2 local news stations to do brief interviews after the ceremony. "They'll want to talk to your family, too," Professor Chin warned. "Parents love getting their moment in the spotlight when their kids achieve something like this." "I'm sure they do," I said. But I wasn't done. The most important part of my plan required a level of manipulation that I'd never attempted before. I needed my parents at that ceremony, but I needed them there without them thinking it was their choice. I called Mia. "Hey sis, graduation day. Are you nervous?" Mia's voice was bright and excited, completely oblivious to what had happened that morning. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. I wish I could be there, but Mom and Dad said." "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Plans have changed." I took a deep breath, preparing to lie to my sister in a way I'd never lied before. But as I thought about my parents' faces that morning, their excitement about her Tesla, their complete dismissal of my achievement, I felt that cold anger settle deeper into my chest. "The ceremony coordinator called this morning," I said. "Apparently, they're doing some special recognition for summa cum laude graduates, and they need family members present for photos. Professional photos that are going in the university magazine and on the website." This wasn't entirely false. There would be photos, just not the kind I was describing. "Oh my God, really? That's amazing, Sarah." The thing is, they specifically requested parents. Not siblings, unfortunately, because of space constraints. So Mom and Dad need to be there. I could hear Mia moving around, probably getting dressed for her own day of celebration. But they were going to pick up my car today. I know, and I feel terrible about the timing. But Mia, this is for the university magazine. It could be really good for Dad's business to be associated with that kind of academic achievement. That was the hook. Dad ran a small marketing consulting firm, and he was always looking for ways to enhance his professional image. The possibility of being featured in university promotional materials would appeal to his ego in a way that simply attending his daughter's graduation apparently didn't. You should definitely tell them, Mia said. The car can wait a day, right? This is your big moment. Sweet Mia, 18 years old, and still believing that our parents would naturally prioritize what was important to their children. She had no idea that I'd just spent the morning watching them choose a car over their daughter's once-in-a-lifetime achievement. Could you call them? I asked. I'm in meetings with professors all morning, but this is kind of time-sensitive. Of course. I'll call them right now. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Mia says they need us for photos at your graduation. What time should we be there? No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd said that morning. Just a practical question about logistics, as if they hadn't just told me I was on my own because Tesla shopping was more important. I texted back. Ceremony starts at 3. You want to be there by 2:30 to get good seats. Can't wait to see you there. Then I added, thanks for making this a priority. It means everything to me. Let them sit with that for a few hours. But I wasn't finished. The final piece of my plan required one more phone call. This one to my best friend Emma, who was also graduating that day, but from the psychology program. Emma, I need a huge favor, and it's going to sound crazy. Sarah, you're graduating summa cum laude in one of the hardest programs at this school. Nothing you say today could sound crazy to me. I explained what had happened that morning, and Emma's silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Emma, I'm here. God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. Your parents are. I know. But here's the thing, I have a plan. And I need your help. I told her about the seating arrangement, about the news interviews, about the lie I'd told Mia to get my parents there. Emma listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for another long moment. You know this is going to change everything with your family, right? Once you do this, there's no going back. There's already no going back, I said. This morning proved that. The only question is whether I let them continue treating me like I don't matter, or I show them exactly what they've been taking for granted. What do you need me to do? Emma's psychology program had taught her a lot about family dynamics, manipulation, and emotional intelligence. More importantly, Emma had been watching my family treat me like an afterthought for 4 years, and she was angry on my behalf in a way that I was still learning to be angry for myself. I need you to help me make sure they understand what they almost missed today. I need them to see what their priorities say about who they are as parents. And I need to do it in a way that they can never pretend it didn't happen. Sarah, Emma's voice was careful. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you pull back the curtain on how they've been treating you, you can't put it back. I looked around the campus where I'd spent 4 years working my ass off, paying my own way, earning honors that my parents were too busy to acknowledge. I thought about that Tesla configurator screen, about their excitement for Mia's achievements and their dismissal of mine. I thought about 22 years of being the easy daughter, the one who didn't need attention or support or celebration. I'm sure, I said. They made their choice this morning. Now I'm making mine. If you've ever reached that breaking point where you realize you've been undervaluing yourself for years because the people who were supposed to love you were doing it first, you know that there's a moment when something just snaps. Not in a destructive way, but in a clarifying way. Like suddenly you can see the chessboard instead of just moving pieces around blindly. That's what happened to me that Tuesday morning. I'd been playing their game for 22 years, following their rules, accepting their version of what I was worth. But graduation day wasn't their day, it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I was going to make sure I was the priority. They just had no idea what they were walking into. By noon, everything was in place. I'd confirmed that my parents would be sitting front row center, directly in the line of sight of the news cameras. I'd arranged for Professor Martinez, my thesis advisor, to give a brief introduction about my research before I received my diploma, something normally reserved for PhD candidates. But he'd agreed after I explained that my parents had never fully understood what I'd been working on for 4 years. I'd even convinced the Dean of Engineering to present me with the Departmental Award for Undergraduate Research Excellence, an honor I'd actually earned but hadn't expected to receive, until I casually mentioned to the department secretary that my parents would be there and would love to see their daughter recognized. The beautiful thing about being the forgotten child is that when you finally decide to step into the spotlight, people are eager to help you shine. Everyone I'd worked with over the past 4 years, professors, staff, fellow students, had watched me quietly excel while seemingly having no family support. They'd seen me work multiple jobs, decline social events because I couldn't afford them, and celebrate my achievements alone. When I finally asked for help making my graduation special, they didn't just say yes, they went above and beyond. But the most important piece of my plan was still in motion. At 1:30, I called my sister from the staging area behind the auditorium, where hundreds of graduates were lining up in alphabetical order. "Mia, how did it go with Mom and Dad?" "They're on their way." Mia's voice was bubbling with excitement. Dad was a little annoyed about having to reschedule the Tesla pickup. But when I explained about the magazine photos and how it could be good for his business image, he totally came around. And Mom started crying. She said she was so proud and couldn't believe her baby was going to be in university publications. Her baby. Right. "That's wonderful," I said, my voice steady despite the irony burning in my chest. "I'm just so grateful they could make it work." "Sarah, can I tell you something?" Mia's voice dropped, becoming more serious. "I know you and Mom and Dad have a weird dynamic sometimes. I know they expect different things from us. But today is about celebrating you, and I think this might be exactly what they need to realize how incredible you are." Sweet Mia, still so innocent, still believing that our parents' love was equal and their expectations fair. Still thinking that this was just about them realizing my worth, rather than them demonstrating that they'd never valued it in the first place. "I hope you're right," I said. "I know I am. And Sarah, I'm sorry I can't be there today. I would have skipped the Tesla thing if I could, but since they needed you for those special photos." The guilt twisted in my stomach. Mia genuinely wanted to be there. She was proud of me in a way our parents had never learned to be. And here I was, manipulating the situation to make a point about their priorities, while she was stuck thinking she couldn't attend because of university requirements. But then I remembered Dad's words that morning, "You're an adult. You can figure out transportation." I remembered Mom calling me dramatic for asking them to prioritize my college graduation over Tesla shopping. I remembered 22 years of being told I was independent, responsible, didn't need the same support as Mia, while watching them pour love and resources into her in ways they'd never even considered for me. "The photos are important," I said. "Don't worry about it. Call me after, okay? I want to hear everything." "I will." By 2:15, I was in my cap and gown, standing with my fellow engineering students, watching families stream into the auditorium. Most of my classmates had multiple family members there, parents, siblings, grandparents, extended family who'd driven hours to be there. Some had decorated the mortarboards with family photos or thank you messages to their parents. A few had "Thanks Mom and Dad" written in glitter. I'd left my mortarboard blank. At 2:25, I spotted them. Mom was wearing a navy dress I'd never seen before, and Dad had on his good suit, the one he wore to important business meetings. They looked proud, excited, like parents who were thrilled to be there celebrating their daughter's achievement. From a distance, you'd never know they planned to skip this entirely in favor of car shopping. They found their seats in the front row, exactly where I'd arranged for them to be. Dad looked around, probably wondering how they'd gotten such prime seating. Mom was already taking photos with her phone, smiling and waving at me when she spotted me in the staging area. The performance was flawless. They looked like devoted parents who wouldn't miss their daughter's graduation for anything in the world. They had no idea that half the auditorium was about to find out exactly what their priorities had been that morning. At 2:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I saw the news crews setting up. 2 local stations, just as Professor Chun had arranged. They were positioning themselves for optimal shots of the stage, which meant they'd capture the entire front row, including my parents, in every frame. At 2:50, Professor Chin approached my parents in their seats. I couldn't hear what he was saying from where I stood, but I could see him gesturing toward the cameras, explaining something that made my parents straighten up with interest. Dad adjusted his tie. Mom patted her hair. At 2:55, the ceremony coordinator made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some special guests with us today. Local news stations are here to cover our outstanding graduates, particularly those who've achieved the highest honors while working multiple jobs to fund their education. We're proud to showcase the dedication and resilience of students like these. I watched my parents' faces from across the auditorium. They were beaming, clearly excited to be featured in what they thought would be a positive news story about their successful daughter. They had no idea what story was actually about to be told. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and circumstance. Dean Williams gave his opening remarks about achievement, dedication, and the support of family. The valedictorian spoke about overcoming challenges and the importance of perseverance, the usual graduation themes, but today they felt like they were written specifically for my situation. When they called the engineering graduates, my heart started pounding, not from nervousness about walking across the stage. I'd been looking forward to that moment for 4 years. The pounding was from anticipation of what was about to happen. Sarah Elizabeth Chin Martinez, summa cum laude, Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering, with special recognition for undergraduate research excellence. The applause was thunderous. For years of 20-hour work weeks while maintaining a 3.98 GPA had earned me respect from faculty and classmates alike. As I walked across the stage, I could see my parents in the front row, clapping enthusiastically, their faces shining with what looked like genuine pride. Professor Martinez stepped forward with the microphone, just as we'd planned. Before presenting Sarah with her diploma, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize something extraordinary," he said. Sarah funded her entire education through part-time work while maintaining the highest academic standards in one of our most demanding programs. She's conducted research that will be published in 3 peer-reviewed journals, and she's been accepted to graduate school with full funding. What makes this even more remarkable is that Sarah accomplished all of this while receiving no financial or logistical support from her family. I watched my parents' faces from the stage. The proud smiles flickered, just slightly. In fact, Professor Martinez continued, Sarah took public transportation to her own graduation ceremony today because her family had other priorities. The auditorium fell completely silent. 2,000 people suddenly focused their attention on the front row, where my parents sat frozen in their seats. This kind of independence and determination represents the very best of what higher education can achieve, Professor Martinez said, handing me my diploma. Congratulations, Sarah. You've earned every bit of this recognition through your own effort and dedication. The applause that followed was different, louder, but also more meaningful. People weren't just clapping for my graduation, they were acknowledging the story that had just been told. The story of a student who'd succeeded despite, not because of her family's support. I looked down at my parents as I shook hands with the dean. Mom's face had gone completely white. Dad was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, clearly realizing that their morning conversation had just been shared with 2,000 people and 2 news cameras. But I wasn't done. As I walked back to my seat, diploma in hand, I could see the news reporters moving toward my parents for their planned interviews. The story they'd come to cover, "Successful Student Celebrates with Proud Family," had just taken a very different turn. And for the first time in 22 years, I felt like the most important person in the room. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth about how you've been treated, you know that moment when you realize there's no going back. That moment when you understand that some bridges are meant to be burned, not because you want to hurt anyone, but because the only way to save yourself is to stop pretending that inequality is love. That's where I was, sitting in that auditorium, watching my parents process the fact that their priorities had just been exposed to everyone who mattered to me. For years, I'd protected their image, made excuses for their behavior, convinced myself that their neglect was somehow justified. Not anymore. The real reckoning was just beginning. The interview started immediately after the ceremony ended. I watched from across the auditorium as the first news crew approached my parents, cameras rolling, microphones ready. Reporter Jessica Walsh from Channel 8 News had that practiced smile that said she thought she was about to film a heartwarming family moment. Mr. and Mrs. Chin Martinez, congratulations on your daughter's incredible achievement. You must be so proud. I couldn't hear their response from where I stood, but I could see Dad's face. The practiced business smile he wore when clients caught him unprepared. Mom kept glancing around, probably looking for an escape route. We understand Sarah funded her entire education herself while working multiple jobs. That must have been a difficult decision as parents, to let her take on that level of independence. There it was, the first real question. I moved closer, weaving through clusters of graduating families, until I could hear their responses. Well, Dad started, his voice carrying that tone he used when he was about to spin a situation in his favor. We've always believed in teaching our children self-reliance. Sarah is incredibly capable, and we wanted her to develop that independence. So this was a conscious parenting choice. Jessica pressed, to have Sarah work multiple jobs rather than providing financial support. We provided a home for her, Mom interjected, her voice slightly defensive, and emotional support. We've always been proud of Sarah's achievements. Proud enough to attend every graduation ceremony? Jessica asked. The question hung in the air like a time bomb. I could see my parents exchange that look, the one they used when they were trying to coordinate their stories in real time. Of course, Dad said. We wouldn't miss our daughter's college graduation, even when you had other plans today. We understand there was some scheduling conflict with a car purchase. The reporter had done her homework. Professor Chun had clearly briefed her well. This wasn't going to be a puff piece about family support. This was investigative journalism on a small scale, and my parents were completely unprepared. I'm not sure what you mean, Mom said, but her voice cracked slightly. We spoke with Sarah earlier, Jessica said. She mentioned that you initially planned to skip her graduation to pick up a Tesla you were purchasing for your younger daughter's high school graduation gift. The auditorium suddenly felt very quiet around us. Other families had stopped their own conversations to listen. This was better than any reality TV show, a real-time family drama unfolding at a college graduation. Dad's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, calculation, and finally resignation. He realized they'd been caught, and anything he said now would either be an admission or an obvious lie captured on camera. Our younger daughter is also graduating this year, he said carefully. We were trying to coordinate multiple celebrations. A $58,000 Tesla for high school graduation versus taking the bus to college graduation, Jessica said. Do you see how that might seem disproportionate? That's when I realized Jessica wasn't just doing her job. She was angry on my behalf. Somewhere in her preparation for this story, she developed genuine outrage at my parents' behavior. This wasn't neutral journalism anymore. This was advocacy. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Mom started. No misunderstanding, I said, walking up to join the interview. Just clarity. All eyes turned to me. The cameras swiveled to capture my approach. This was the moment I'd been building toward all day, and I felt surprisingly calm. Sarah. Jessica's face lit up. Congratulations again. Can you tell us about your experience today? It's been illuminating, I said, looking directly at my parents. For years, I convinced myself that working 3 jobs while going to school was character building. That watching my parents pour resources into my sister while telling me I needed to be independent was somehow fair. That taking the bus to my own graduation while they shopped for luxury cars was normal. My mother's face crumpled. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Mom. You made your priorities clear this morning when you told me that something had come up, that you couldn't drive me to graduation because you were buying me a Tesla. You called me dramatic for being hurt by that. You said I didn't need the same kind of support she does. The camera operator zoomed in on my parents' faces. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mom was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of humiliation. The beautiful thing about today, I continued, is that it proves something I've always suspected, but never wanted to admit. I don't actually need you. I've been succeeding without your support for years. I graduated summa cum laude. I'm starting graduate school with full funding, and I did it all while you were focused on your other daughter. So thank you for teaching me that I'm capable of achieving anything I want completely on my own. Jessica jumped back in. How does it feel to know that this story will likely be seen by thousands of people in the San Diego area? I looked straight into the camera. I hope other kids who feel forgotten in their families see this and realize that their worth isn't determined by their parents' priorities. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who make love feel conditional. But your value doesn't change just because they can't see it. Then I look back at my parents. And I hope parents who are watching this ask themselves if they're treating all their children equitably. Because kids notice everything, even when they don't say anything. The interview wrapped up with Jessica asking about my future plans. I talked about graduate school, my research interests, my career goals. Normal graduation interview stuff, except for the context of family dysfunction that had just been aired on local television. As the cameras stopped rolling, my parents stood there in stunned silence. Other families were openly staring now, some with sympathy, others with judgment. A few people approached me with congratulations and words of support. One mother actually hugged me and whispered, "You're incredibly strong. I'm proud of you." But my parents? They looked shell-shocked. "Sarah," Dad started, his voice hoarse, "can we talk privately?" "About what?" I asked. "About how you prioritize car shopping over your daughter's graduation. About how you've spent my entire life telling me I don't need the same support as Mia. About how you called me dramatic this morning for being hurt by your choices. You ambushed us," Mom said, her voice shaking with anger. "You lied to get us here, then humiliated us on television." And there it was. Not remorse for their behavior. Not recognition of how they treated me. Anger at me for exposing it. "I didn't ambush you," I said calmly. "I just made sure that for once, your actions had consequences. For 22 years, I've been protecting your image, making excuses for why you treat your daughters differently, convincing myself that your neglect was somehow justified. Today, I decided to stop doing that. We never neglected you. Dad, you were going to miss my college graduation to buy my sister a car. If that's not neglect, what is?" People around us had stopped pretending not to listen. This was the most entertainment some of these families had seen in years. A real-life family implosion at what should have been a celebration. "You've always been independent," Mom said desperately. "We thought that's what you wanted." What I wanted was for my parents to show up for me the same way they show up for Mia. What I wanted was to feel like I mattered as much as she does. What I wanted was one day, just one day, where I was the priority. The second news crew was approaching now, having finished interviewing other graduates. I could see in my parents' faces that they realized this wasn't over. This story was going to be on 2 different stations, maybe picked up by other outlets. Their friends, their neighbors, Dad's business clients. Everyone was going to know how they treated their daughter. "We need to go," Dad said abruptly. "This has gone far enough." "You're right," I agreed. "It has gone far enough. 22 years too far." They started to walk away, but I called after them. "Oh, and Mom, Dad, I won't be coming home tonight, or any other night. I'm moving out this weekend. I've already put down a deposit on an apartment near campus, using money I've been saving from my campus jobs. Because you know what? I really am independent. I don't need parents who see me as an afterthought." Mom turned back, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, please. We can talk about this at home. There's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice this morning. I'm just making mine." As they walked away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but pure relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had told my parents exactly how their behavior had affected me, and I had done it in a way that made it impossible for them to dismiss or minimize. The second interview went similarly to the first, except this reporter had clearly been briefed by his colleague. He was even more direct in his questions, more pointed in his observations about the disparity between my achievements and my parents' support. By the time he finished, I had essentially laid out a case study in family dysfunction for public consumption. But here's what I didn't expect: the support from strangers. As the news crews packed up their equipment, people started approaching me. Other parents, other graduates, even some of the faculty who had witnessed the interviews. I just wanted to say, one mother told me that what you did took incredible courage. I've watched my own parents favor my brother for years, and I never had the guts to call them out on it. You're going to be okay, an older professor said, shaking my hand. Students like you, the ones who succeed despite obstacles rather than because of advantages, those are the ones who change the world. A graduate from the business school pulled me aside. My parents did something similar to me. Not the same situation, but the same feeling of being invisible while they focused on my sister. It took me years to realize that their inability to see my worth didn't diminish my actual worth. You figured that out a lot younger than I did. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to finally stop shrinking yourself to accommodate other people's limitations, I can tell you, it feels like breathing for the first time in years. It feels like finally taking up the space you were always meant to occupy. But it also feels terrifying, because once you stop accepting crumbs, you can't go back to being grateful for them. Once you refuse to be invisible, you can't pretend that being overlooked doesn't hurt. Once you tell the truth about how you've been treated, you can't unknow it. As I walked back to my dorm room that evening, diploma in hand, I realized that I had just burned every bridge with my family in the most public way possible. There would be no quiet reconciliation, no private conversations where we worked through our differences. I had made sure that their treatment of me would be visible to anyone who cared to look. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right. The news stories aired that evening at 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. I watched them from Emma's dorm room, both of us sitting cross-legged on her bed with takeout Chinese food, witnessing the complete dismantling of my family's public image in high definition. The stories were even more damaging than I'd anticipated. The news editors had clearly decided this wasn't just a graduation story. This was a story about parental favoritism, financial inequality between siblings, and the resilience of students who succeed without family support. They'd included statistics about college students who work multiple jobs, interviews with professors about recognizing unsupported students, and even a brief segment with a family therapist discussing the psychological impact of unequal treatment between siblings. My parents came across exactly as badly as you'd expect. Dad looked like a businessman caught in financial fraud, making excuses and trying to spin obvious facts. Mom looked like someone who'd been confronted with her own cruelty and couldn't understand why anyone was upset about it. The Tesla purchase was mentioned repeatedly, with the $58,000 price tag contrasted against my bus fare to graduation. But the most devastating part was the footage of me walking across the stage to receive my diploma while Professor Martinez explained that I'd funded my entire education through part-time work. The camera had captured my parents' faces during that moment, the transition from pride to confusion to horror as they realized what was happening. Watching it back, I could see the exact second when they understood that their morning conversation was being broadcast to the entire city. Jesus, Sarah, Emma said, pausing the recording. You really went nuclear. Too much. I asked, though I wasn't sure I cared about the answer. No, not too much. Just thorough. There's no coming back from this. She was right. This wasn't the kind of family conflict that gets resolved over Sunday dinner. This was the kind of public exposure that changes relationships permanently. My phone had been buzzing all evening, but I'd been ignoring it. Finally, around 9 p.m., I decided to check the messages. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, 3 from Mia. The text messages were intense. Mom, Sarah, please call us. We need to talk about what happened today. Mom, I can't believe you would humiliate us like this on television. Mom, your father is beside himself. His business associates are calling. Mom, we're your parents. How could you do this to us? Dad, this was inappropriate and vindictive. Call me immediately. Dad, you've damaged our reputation over a misunderstanding. Dad, I'm disappointed in your lack of maturity in handling this situation. And then Mia, Sarah, what happened? I just saw the news. Are you okay? The difference in tone was stark. My parents were focused on their embarrassment, their reputation, the inconvenience I'd caused them. Mia was worried about me. I called Mia back. Sarah, oh my God, I can't believe what I just saw. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm fine, Mia. I'm at Emma's. But what happened? I thought they were there for those special photos you mentioned. Right. Mia still believed my lie about university photos. She had no idea that I'd manipulated the situation to ensure our parents would be there for the public confrontation. There were no special photos, I said quietly. I made that up to get them to come to graduation after they told me they couldn't because they were buying your Tesla. Silence on the other end of the line. Mia, they were going to miss your graduation to pick up my car? Her voice was small, shocked. They told me that something came up, that they couldn't drive me because they had other priorities. When I asked what was more important than their daughter's college graduation, they showed me the Tesla configurator and explained how excited they were to surprise you. Sarah, Mia started crying. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known, I would have told them to skip the car. I would have. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. This is about them and their choices. You didn't ask them to prioritize a car over my graduation. But I could have said something. I could have. Mia, listen to me. You were not responsible for managing our parents' priorities. You're 18 years old. You shouldn't have to police whether they treat their children fairly. We were both quiet for a moment. Then Mia asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens now? Are you really not coming home? I can't come home, Mia. Not after this. They're not angry because they realize they hurt me. They're angry because I exposed it publicly. They're not asking how they can do better. They're asking how I could embarrass them like this. That tells me everything I need to know about their priorities. But we're family. Family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment because it comes from people who are supposed to love you. I spent 22 years making excuses for them, telling myself that their favoritism towards you was somehow justified, convincing myself that being the independent daughter was a privilege rather than neglect. I can't do that anymore. Mia was crying harder now. I never wanted them to treat you differently. I never asked for special treatment. I know you didn't. And you know what? You deserve parents who celebrate your achievements and support your dreams. I'm not angry at you for receiving love. I'm angry at them for rationing it. Will you still talk to me? Are we okay? That question broke my heart. Sweet Mia, worried that my conflict with our parents would cost her the relationship with her big sister. Worried that their dysfunction would destroy what we had built together. Of course we're okay. You're my sister and I love you. This is between me and them, not between me and you. Can I see you? Before you move out? I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. They're going to be dealing with fallout from this for a while, and I don't want you caught in the middle. I want to be caught in the middle, Mia said fiercely. You're my sister. If they're treating you badly, then I want to be caught in the middle. There was a strength in her voice that I'd never heard before. Mia was growing up, developing her own sense of justice, her own ability to see through our parents' justifications. Let me get settled in my new place first, I said. Then we'll figure out how to maintain our relationship while I figure out mine with them. After we hung up, Emma and I sat in silence for a while, processing the magnitude of what had happened. You know this is going to follow you, right? Emma said gently, not in a bad way, but this story is going to be part of your identity now. The girl who called out her parents on live television. I thought about that. For years, my identity had been the responsible daughter, the independent one, the one who doesn't need help. Those labels had been assigned to me by people who used them to justify giving me less. Now I had a new label, one I'd chosen for myself, the one who refused to accept inequality disguised as love. I can live with that, I said. What do you think happens next? I honestly didn't know. My parents might try to repair the relationship, though their initial response suggested they were more focused on damage control than self-reflection. They might decide I was ungrateful and cut contact themselves. They might try to turn other family members against me, painting me as vindictive and unstable. But for the first time in my life, their possible reactions didn't terrify me. I had spent so many years managing their emotions, protecting their image. accepting their limitations as my own fault. Tonight, I was free of that responsibility. I think, I said slowly, that I'm about to find out what my life looks like when I stop trying to earn love from people who've already decided how much I'm worth. If you've ever wondered what happens after you finally stop accepting the unacceptable, I can tell you, the world doesn't end. The people who were counting on your silence might be angry, might try to make you feel guilty for speaking up, might even try to punish you for refusing to play your assigned role. But you don't disappear just because they're uncomfortable with your visibility. You don't become worthless just because they're angry at you for knowing your worth. The scariest part isn't the conflict, it's the freedom that comes after. Because once you stop shrinking yourself to fit other people's expectations, you have to figure out who you actually are when you're taking up your full space. I was about to find out. The aftermath hit like a tsunami. By Thursday morning, the story had been picked up by 3 more local news outlets, a regional newspaper, and somehow made it onto a popular social media account that shared faith in humanity stories. Except this wasn't exactly a faith in humanity story. This was more of a toxic family dynamics exposed story that people were sharing because it validated their own experiences with parental favoritism. My phone was completely unusable. Hundreds of friend requests on social media, interview requests from podcasters, messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family inequality. But the most telling messages were from people I actually knew. My high school guidance counselor sent a Facebook message. "Sarah, I always wondered why such a bright student never had family at school events. This explains so much. I'm proud of you for speaking your truth." My freshman year roommate. "Girl, I remember how you never went home for family dinners or holidays unless it was a major occasion. I thought you were just super independent, but now I understand you were protecting yourself." Even Professor Williams from my sophomore chemistry class. "Sarah, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I've learned to recognize students who are succeeding without family support. I always suspected your situation was more complex than you let on. Your strength has been remarkable to witness. But the message that hit me hardest came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Patterson, my childhood piano teacher. I'd taken lessons from her for 3 years when I was in elementary school, until my parents decided that piano was impractical and shifted their resources to Mia's art classes instead. "Sarah, I saw the news story and I had to reach out. I remember when your parents stopped your lessons because they said music wasn't a useful skill for you to develop. The same week, they enrolled Mia in art classes because she had natural talent that should be nurtured. You were heartbroken, but you told me you understood because Mia needed more support. You were 9 years old, and you were already protecting their image and accepting their inequality as normal. I've thought about that conversation many times over the years, and I'm so glad you finally refused to accept that treatment." 9 years old. I had been 9 years old when I first learned to swallow my disappointment and rationalize my parents' favoritism. 22 years of practice had made me an expert at accepting less, at convincing myself that inequality was somehow justified. But the most difficult conversation was still coming. Friday evening, my parents finally showed up at Emma's dorm. I saw them from the window, Dad in his business casual uniform, Mom carrying what looked like a peace offering in the form of takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. They looked older than they had on Tuesday, worn down by 3 days of managing the fallout from their public exposure. Emma answered the door. "Mr. and Mrs. Chin Martinez, Sarah didn't mention you were coming. We need to speak with our daughter," Dad said in his most authoritative voice. "I'll ask if she wants to see you," Emma replied, not moving from the doorway. I appreciated her protection, but this conversation was inevitable. I came to the door. "Mom, Dad, Sarah, honey," Mom started, her voice carefully modulated. "We brought dinner. Can we come in and talk?" I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time since Tuesday. They looked like people who had spent 3 days dealing with consequences they'd never imagined possible. Dad's usual confidence was missing. Mom's careful composure was cracking around the edges. "We can talk in the common room," I said. Emma's room is too small for all of us. The dorm common room was mostly empty on a Friday evening. We sat around one of the study tables, my parents on one side, Me on the other, like a business negotiation rather than a family conversation. Sarah, Dad began, what happened on Tuesday was unacceptable. The way you handled your disagreement with us was immature and vindictive. And there it was, 3 days later, and he was still focused on my behavior rather than theirs. The way I handled it? I asked calmly. Or the way I exposed it? You ambushed us, Mom said. You lied to get us there, then humiliated us in public. I made sure you were present for my graduation, I corrected. Something you had already decided wasn't important enough to prioritize. That's not fair, Dad said. We were trying to coordinate multiple celebrations. A Tesla purchase is not a celebration coordination conflict, I interrupted. A Tesla purchase is a choice. You chose to prioritize buying Mia a $60,000 car over attending my college graduation. When I pointed out how hurtful that was, you called me dramatic and told me to figure out my own transportation. We didn't mean. Yes, you did mean it. That's the problem. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a communication issue. This was you demonstrating your priorities clearly, and then getting angry when I refused to pretend those priorities were acceptable. Mom opened the takeout containers as if familiar food would somehow soften the conversation. Sarah, we love you. We've always loved you. I don't doubt that you love me, I said. I doubt that you like me. I doubt that you value me. I doubt that you see me as worth the same investment you've made in Mia. That's not true. Mom, when was the last time you asked me about my research? About my friends? About my plans for the future? Silence. When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements without comparing it to something Mia had done? More silence. When was the last time you spent money on something I wanted rather than something I needed? Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, we've treated you differently because you're different. You've always been more independent, more self-sufficient. Mia needs more support. Mia needs more support, or you enjoy giving her more support? The question hung in the air like a challenge, because that was the real issue, wasn't it? It wasn't that Mia actually needed more support. It was that supporting Mia felt good to them in a way that supporting me apparently didn't. You've always been so competent, Mom said weakly. So capable of handling things on your own. I became competent because you expected me to be. I became independent because dependence wasn't an option you offered me. I learned to handle things on my own because asking for help was discouraged. We never discouraged. Mom, when I was 16 and made varsity volleyball, what did you say? She looked confused. I don't remember exactly. You said, that's nice, honey, without looking up from your magazine. When Mia got a B+ on a history test the same day, you took her out for celebration milkshakes and bought her art supplies as a reward. I learned that day that my achievements weren't worth celebrating, but hers were worth rewarding. That's not how it happened, Dad protested. That's exactly how it happened. And it happened dozens of times in dozens of different ways until I learned to expect nothing and be grateful for scraps. I pulled out my phone and showed them something I'd screenshotted earlier that week, a social media post from one of their friends. Mrs. Rodriguez posted this yesterday. So proud of the Chin Martinez family. Their daughter Mia is graduating high school and starting USC in the fall. She included 3 photos of Mia and 0 mention of the fact that you have another daughter who just graduated college with highest honors. My parents stared at the phone screen. Your friends don't even know I exist as anything more than a footnote to Mia's story. And that's because you've never presented me as anything more than that. Sarah, Mom whispered, we never meant to make you feel invisible. But you did make me feel invisible. For 22 years, you made me feel like my worth was conditional on not requiring the same investment you gave Mia. And when I finally asked you to show up for one day, one single day that was about me, you chose car shopping instead. Dad leaned back in his chair, looking defeated. What do you want from us, Sarah? What would it take to fix this? It was a good question. What did I want? An apology? An explanation? A promise to do better? I want you to understand that this isn't about Tuesday, I said. Tuesday was just the day I stopped accepting inequality as love. This is about 22 years of feeling like the consolation prize in my own family. But what do you want us to do now? Mom asked. I want you to figure that out yourselves, I said. I want you to look at how you've treated me compared to how you've treated Mia. And I want you to decide whether you think that's fair. I want you to ask yourselves why you think I don't deserve the same level of investment, celebration, and support that she gets automatically. And if we do that, if we acknowledge that we've made mistakes, then maybe we can build something new. But I'm not going back to being the daughter who accepts less because it's easier for you to give me less. They sat there processing that for several minutes. Finally, Dad spoke. The news story, people are talking. It's affecting my business. And there it was, 3 days later, and he was still more concerned about his reputation than his daughter's feelings. I'm sorry your choices had consequences, I said. But I'm not sorry I told the truth about how you've treated me. Sarah, Mom said desperately, we're your parents. We're supposed to be a family. Then act like it, I said simply. Act like I'm worth the same consideration you give Mia. Act like my achievements matter as much as hers. Act like I deserve to feel valued in my own family. I stood up from the table. When you figure out how to do that, call me. Until then, I need space to remember who I am when I'm not constantly trying to earn love that should have been freely given. As I walked back toward the elevator, I heard Mom calling after me. Sarah, please don't do this. We can work it out. But I didn't turn around, because for the first time in my life, I was more interested in working it out for myself than working it out for them. If you've ever had to teach the people who raised you how to love you properly, you know how exhausting and heartbreaking and necessary it is. You know that sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to be willing to lose it. That's where I was, finally willing to lose the relationship I'd been settling for, in hopes of building one I could actually live with. Moving out of my childhood home was surreal. I'd been planning to leave for graduate school anyway, but doing it this way, in the middle of a family crisis, under the scrutiny of local news coverage, with the feeling that I was escaping rather than simply moving on, made everything feel more significant. Emma helped me pack my things while my parents were at work. We drove to the house in her car, loaded with boxes and trash bags, prepared to strip my room of 22 years of accumulated life. But walking into that room, I realized how little there actually was to take. Compared to Mia's room down the hall, with its carefully curated aesthetic, expensive furniture, and walls covered with family photos and achievement certificates, my room looked like a guest room that someone happened to sleep in occasionally. My furniture was mostly hand-me-downs or pieces I bought myself with job money. My walls had a few academic awards and some photos with friends, but nothing that screamed beloved daughter or family investment. Even my bookshelf, packed with textbooks and novels I'd bought used, looked sparse compared to Mia's collection of art supplies, photography equipment, and gifts from various family occasions. Jesus, Sarah, Emma said, looking around, this is depressing. What do you mean? I mean, this doesn't look like the room of someone who lived here for 2 decades. This looks like the room of someone who was just visiting. She was right. My room looked temporary, unloved, functional rather than celebratory. It looked like the room of someone who had learned early not to get too comfortable, not to expect too much investment in her space or her interests. The most telling discovery was a box under my bed filled with things I'd saved over the years: report cards, achievement certificates, photos from school events, programs from plays, and concerts I'd been involved in. Things that, in most families, would have been displayed proudly on refrigerators or bulletin boards or family photo walls. In my family, I'd apparently been the curator of my own achievements, saving them privately because no one else had shown interest in preserving them. Emma found the box while we were cleaning out under the bed. Sarah, what is this? I opened it and started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was crying. That's my childhood, I said. Everything I thought was important enough to save. She rifled through the contents. Honor roll certificates from elementary through high school, photos from science fairs where I'd won awards, programs from the debate tournaments I'd participated in, even the acceptance letter from UC San Diego that had marked the beginning of my independence. Where are the family photos? She asked. The pictures of you with your parents at these events? I kept laughing. That slightly hysterical laugh that comes when you realize something so obvious you can't believe you missed it for years. There aren't any family photos because they weren't at these events. Emma stared at me. What do you mean they weren't at these events? I mean they didn't come to most of them. School plays, science fairs, debate tournaments, Award ceremonies, I usually went alone or got rides from friends' parents. Sarah, I told myself it was because they were busy, because work was demanding, because they trusted me to handle things independently. But looking at this box, I realized I was documenting my own childhood because no one else was. We sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by boxes of my belongings and this archive of unwitnessed achievements. For the first time, I was seeing my childhood objectively, without the protective filter of making excuses for my parents' absence from my life. This is why the graduation thing was so important to you, Emma said quietly. It wasn't just about graduation. It was about 22 years of feeling like I was performing for an empty audience. As we finished packing, I found myself thinking about the conversation with my parents the night before. Their focus on their reputation, their confusion about what I wanted from them, their apparent inability to understand why I was upset about being treated as an afterthought. But I also thought about something else. For the first time in my adult life, I had told my parents exactly how their behavior affected me, and I had done it without protecting their feelings or minimizing my own hurt. It felt terrifying and liberating and completely necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Can I come see your new place when you're settled?" I texted back, of course. "Maybe this weekend. I have something I want to tell you. Something I've been thinking about since Tuesday." That evening, I was unpacking in my new studio apartment near campus. A tiny but perfect space that I'd furnished entirely with my own money and my own choices when Mia showed up at my door. She looked different. Older, more serious, like she'd been doing some heavy thinking over the past few days. "I brought Chinese food," she said, holding up bags from our favorite restaurant. "And I wanted to talk." We sat on my floor, eating lo mein out of takeout containers, and Mia told me things I'd never expected to hear. "I've been thinking about what you said on the news," she started, "about how they treat us differently. And I realize you're right, but I also realize something else. I don't think their favoritism has been good for me either." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm 18 years old and I've never had a job. I've never had to figure out how to solve my own problems. I've never had to work for anything I wanted. You know what happened when I got that Tesla? I waited. I realized I didn't even want it that much. I wanted Mom and Dad to be excited about my graduation, and the car was just a symbol of that. But you know what I really wanted?" "What?" "I wanted them to be proud of me the way they should have been proud of you. All these years, I thought their focus on me meant I was special. But watching what happened to you made me realize that their attention came at your expense. And that doesn't feel good." Mia started crying, and I moved closer to put my arm around her. "I never asked them to treat you differently," she said. "But I also never questioned it. I just accepted that I got more support, more resources, more celebration. And I think that made me weaker, not stronger. Mia, you're not responsible. But I am responsible for what I do now that I know better. And I've decided some things." She pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my jaw drop. A screenshot of a social media post she'd written. "I posted this yesterday," she said. The post read, "I've been thinking a lot about fairness and family this week. My sister Sarah just graduated college with highest honors while working multiple jobs to pay her own way. Meanwhile, our parents bought me a $60,000 car for graduating high school. I'm grateful for their generosity, but I'm not comfortable with the inequality. Sarah deserves to be celebrated and supported just as much as I do. Sometimes love looks like standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. #family, #fairness, #sister love." "Mia," I whispered, "you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. Because you were right. Kids notice everything. And I've been noticing for years that you got less while I got more, and I never said anything about it. I let you protect me from the truth about our family dynamics, and that wasn't fair to either of us." The post had dozens of comments and shares. Friends from high school, family members, even some of my parents' friends had responded. Most were supportive, some were confused, and a few were critical of Mia for airing family business publicly. "How did Mom and Dad react?" "They're furious," Mia said simply. "They think we're ganging up on them, that we're making them look like terrible parents publicly." "Are you okay with that?" "I'm more okay with that than I am with staying quiet while my sister gets treated like she doesn't matter." We sat in silence for a while. eating Chinese food on the floor of my tiny apartment, processing the magnitude of how much our family dynamics had shifted in less than a week. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, Mia said. But I do know that I don't want the kind of relationship with our parents where I get benefits at your expense. And I don't want to be the kind of person who accepts inequality just because it benefits me. That's very mature of you. I learned it from watching my big sister refuse to accept inequality just because it was easier. That night, after Mia left, I sat in my new apartment and took inventory of my life. For the first time in 22 years, I was completely financially independent, physically separated from my family's dysfunction, and free to define my own worth without their input. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary. My phone rang around 10 p.m. Unknown number. Is this Sarah Chin Martinez? Yes. This is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from UC San Diego's Alumni Relations Office. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. How can I help you? I saw the news coverage of your graduation this week, and I wanted to reach out personally. What you accomplished, graduating summa cum laude while working multiple jobs with no family financial support, is exactly the kind of story we love to highlight for prospective students and their families. I wasn't sure where this was going. Okay, we'd like to feature your story in our next alumni newsletter and on our website, not focusing on the family drama, but on your resilience, your work ethic, and your academic achievements. We think it could be inspiring for other students who are navigating college without traditional family support. That's really flattering. There's more. We're also launching a new scholarship program for students who are funding their own education while maintaining high academic standards. We'd like to name it after you, the Sarah Chin Martinez Scholarship for Academic Independence. Would you be interested in helping us develop the criteria and maybe serving on the selection committee? I sat down hard on my futon. A week ago, I was taking the bus to my own graduation while my parents shopped for cars. Now UC San Diego wanted to name a scholarship after me. Dr. Walsh, yes. I'd be honored to help with that. Wonderful. I'll send you some information this week. And Sarah, what you did took tremendous courage. A lot of students in your situation suffer in silence because they don't want to embarrass their families. By speaking up, you've given other students permission to advocate for themselves too. After she hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized something profound. The story I'd been so afraid to tell. The story of being the forgotten daughter, the one who succeeded despite neglect rather than because of support, was resonating with people because it wasn't just my story. It was the story of countless kids who'd learned to expect less, accept less, and be grateful for less. And for the first time, I understood that my parents' inability to see my worth said nothing about my actual value, and everything about their limitations as parents. If you've ever wondered whether speaking up about mistreatment is worth the chaos it causes, I can tell you this. Sometimes the chaos is the point. Sometimes the only way to build something healthy is to tear down something toxic, even when that something has been your normal for decades. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop protecting people from the consequences of their own choices. 3 weeks after graduation, the scholarship announcement was published in the UC San Diego alumni newsletter and posted on their social media accounts. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared hundreds of times, and the university's development office reported that they'd received over $50,000 in donations specifically for the scholarship fund. But the most meaningful responses came from students and recent graduates who shared their own stories in the comments. Stories of working multiple jobs while maintaining high GPAs. Stories of attending graduations alone because family couldn't be bothered to show up. Stories of achieving academic success while feeling invisible in their own families. One comment particularly struck me. I graduated valedictorian from high school and my parents missed the ceremony because my brother had a baseball game. I convinced myself for years that this was normal, that I was just low maintenance. Seeing Sarah's story helped me realize that being low maintenance shouldn't mean being low priority. Another. I'm a first-generation college student whose parents actively discouraged my education because they thought I was getting above myself. I graduated last year and paid for everything myself, but I never told anyone because I was embarrassed. Sarah's courage to speak publicly about family neglect has inspired me to stop hiding my achievements. The scholarship had inadvertently become a rallying point for students who'd succeeded without family support, and the university was taking notice. Dr. Walsh called me again with an update. Sarah, we've never seen a response like this to a scholarship announcement. We're getting applications from students all over California, and the donor response has been incredible. We're going to be able to offer multiple scholarships this year instead of just one. That's amazing, I said, though I was still processing the fact that my family dysfunction had somehow launched a movement. There's something else. The Dean of Students wants to meet with you about developing a support program for students who don't have family financial backing. Apparently, your story has highlighted a gap in our services that we hadn't fully recognized. A support program for students like me. Students who'd been succeeding quietly, without fanfare, without the safety net of family resources. I'd love to be involved in that. But while my public life was taking unexpected positive turns, my family situation remained complicated. My parents had gone completely silent after Mia's social media posts supporting me. No calls, no texts, no attempts at communication. It was like they decided that if both their daughters were going to publicly criticize them, they'd just cut us both off rather than engage in self-reflection. Mia was handling this differently than I'd expected. Instead of being crushed by our parents' silence, she seemed energized by it. I've been thinking, she told me during one of our weekly coffee dates, about how much of my life has been arranged for me. College choice, major selection, even most of my high school activities. They were all things Mom and Dad thought would be good for me, not necessarily things I was passionate about. What are you passionate about? She was quiet for a moment, stirring her latte thoughtfully. I want to be a teacher, she said finally. Elementary school. I want to work with kids who don't have stable home situations, kids who need someone to believe in them the way no one believed in you. This was not the career path our parents had envisioned for her. They'd been pushing her toward business or communications, something that would be practical and lucrative. Teaching was exactly the kind of career they discouraged me from considering because it didn't pay enough. That's beautiful, Mia. Are you going to change your major? Already did. I switched from business to elementary education yesterday. I also got a job at an after-school tutoring program, and I'm looking into volunteering with kids in foster care. I stared at my little sister, who was apparently becoming the person she wanted to be instead of the person our parents had designed her to be. How do you feel about that? Terrified, she said honestly, but also excited. For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what I want instead of what someone else thinks I should want. Mom and Dad are going to hate that you changed majors. Probably. But you know what? I'm 18 years old, and I'm paying for my own education with loans and work-study money. They don't get a vote in my life decisions anymore. What happened to the Tesla? Mia grinned. I sold it. You what? I sold it and used the money to pay for my first year of college. I didn't want their guilt gift anymore, and I didn't want to drive around in a $60,000 reminder of how they prioritize their children differently. Mia, the best part was telling them after I'd already done it. Dad went ballistic, said I was ungrateful and impulsive. Mom cried and said she couldn't understand why both her daughters were determined to hurt her. I told them that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to become someone I could respect. My little sister had sold a Tesla and used the money to fund her independence. She'd changed her major to follow her passion instead of their expectations. She'd gotten a job and started volunteering with underserved kids. In 3 weeks, Mia had become more autonomous than I'd been at 22. I'm proud of you, I said. I learned from the best. You showed me what it looks like to stop accepting inequality as love. Now I'm figuring out what it looks like to stop accepting control as care. That afternoon, I got an unexpected call from my mother. The first time she'd contacted me since our confrontation in Emma's dorm. Sarah, we need to talk. About what? About this situation. About what's happening to our family. What's happening to our family is accountability, I said calmly. For the first time, your actions are having consequences. Can you come home? Can we sit down and work this out like adults? I am working it out like an adult, Mom. I'm building a life where I don't have to beg for basic consideration from the people who are supposed to love me. Sarah, please. You're destroying our family. I didn't destroy our family. I just stopped pretending it was healthy. There was a long pause. Then Mom said something that surprised me. You're right. What? You're right. About how we treated you. About the favoritism. About all of it. Your father and I have been talking, and we've been looking back at everything. We made mistakes, Sarah. Big ones. I sat down, not trusting my legs to hold me up during this conversation. Go on. We convinced ourselves that you were just naturally independent, that you didn't need the same kind of support we gave Mia. But the truth is, it was easier to focus on her because she demanded attention in ways that felt familiar to us. You quietly excelled at everything, and we took that for granted. This was the first time either of my parents had ever acknowledged the disparity in how they treated us. Why didn't you see it before? I think we didn't want to see it, Mom said quietly, because seeing it would have meant acknowledging that we were failing you. And it was easier to tell ourselves that you were fine, that you were thriving on your own, than to admit that we were neglecting one daughter while spoiling the other. And now we've lost both our daughters, and we're finally understanding what we did wrong. I was quiet for a long time, processing this admission. It felt good to hear, but it also felt insufficient. 22 years of inequality couldn't be resolved with one conversation, no matter how honest it was. What do you want from me, Mom? I want a chance to do better. I want to learn how to be the mother you deserve to have all along. And if I'm not ready for that yet, then we'll wait, she said. However long it takes. We'll wait, and we'll work on ourselves, and we'll hope that someday you'll be willing to give us another chance. It was the right answer, but I still wasn't sure I believed it. Mom, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry because you made mistakes. I'm angry because when I tried to tell you how your behavior affected me, your first response was to protect your reputation rather than examine your actions. You were more concerned about being embarrassed on television than about the fact that you'd hurt your daughter. I know, and I'm ashamed of that. Are you ashamed of how you treated me? Or are you ashamed of how it looked when it became public? Another long pause. Both, she said honestly. And I know that's not good enough. I know I should be ashamed of how we treated you regardless of whether anyone else knew about it. It was a more honest answer than I'd expected, and it gave me hope that maybe eventually we could build something better than what we'd had before. I'm not ready to come home, I said, and I'm not ready to pretend everything is okay. But I'm willing to consider the possibility that we might be able to build something new, if you're truly committed to doing the work to change. We are, Mom said. Sarah, we love you. We've always loved you, even when we were terrible at showing it. I love you too, I said. But love isn't enough anymore. I need respect. I need equal treatment. I need to feel valued instead of tolerated. We understand, and we're going to figure out how to give you that. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and tried to process this conversation. For the first time, my parents had acknowledged the inequality, taken responsibility for their choices, and committed to change. It felt like the beginning of something, though I wasn't sure what. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back to being the daughter who accepted less because it was easier for everyone else. If we were going to rebuild our relationship, it would be on terms that honored my worth, not on terms that protected their comfort. And if they couldn't do that, then I'd continue building a life where I was valued, supported, and celebrated, even if that life didn't include them. If you've ever had to decide whether to give someone another chance after they've repeatedly shown you who they are, you know how complicated that decision can be. Hope and skepticism war with each other. You want to believe that people can change while protecting yourself from further disappointment. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay open to the possibility of healing while maintaining boundaries that protect your peace. Sometimes growth requires holding both hope and self-protection in the same space. That's where I was, open but not naive, hopeful but not desperate. Ready for reconciliation, but not at any cost. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, grading undergraduate lab reports as a graduate teaching assistant, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. You need to see this. She'd sent me a link to a local news follow-up story titled, 6 Months Later. how one graduate story changed a family and inspired a movement. The story featured updates on several people who'd been affected by my graduation day confrontation. The scholarship fund had grown to over $200,000, supporting 15 students in their first year. The student support program at UC San Diego had become a model that other universities were implementing. 3 other families had reached out to family therapists after seeing the story, recognizing similar patterns in their own dynamics. But the part that made me cry was the interview with my parents. "We made terrible mistakes," my father said, looking directly into the camera with none of his usual practiced composure. "We convinced ourselves that treating our daughters differently was justified, that Sarah was just naturally independent while Mia needed more support. The truth is, we created Sarah's independence by failing to offer her the same level of care we gave our younger daughter." "What have you learned in the past 6 months?" the reporter asked. "We've learned that love isn't just about feeling. It's about action," my mother answered. "We love both our daughters, but our actions didn't reflect equal love. We're in family therapy now, working to understand how we develop these patterns and how we can do better." "Have you rebuilt your relationship with Sarah?" "We're working on it," Dad said. "Sarah has been incredibly gracious in giving us the opportunity to demonstrate change, rather than just promise it. She's taught us that trust is earned through consistent behavior, not just apologetic words." The reporter turned to me, in footage that had apparently been filmed the week before without my knowledge. "Sarah, how do you feel about your parents' efforts to change?" I watched myself on screen, looking more confident and self-assured than I'd ever seen myself look. "I'm cautiously optimistic," I heard myself say. "The past 6 months have shown me that people can change if they're truly committed to the work." My parents have been in therapy. They've made concrete changes in how they interact with both Mia and me, and they've stopped making excuses for past behavior while focusing on current actions. "What would you tell other people who are dealing with similar family dynamics?" "I'd tell them that you can't control other people's behavior, but you can control your response to it. You can't force people to value you, but you can stop accepting devaluation as normal. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to refuse to participate in unhealthy patterns." The story concluded with footage of our first family dinner in 7 months, filmed just 2 weeks earlier. We were at a restaurant, neutral territory, and the conversation looked tentative but genuine. Mom was asking me about my graduate research with what seemed like real interest. Dad was listening to Mia talk about her education major without trying to redirect her towards something more practical. The dynamics were different, more equal, more respectful. Not perfect, but definitely better. After I finished watching the story, I called Mia. "Did you know they were doing a follow-up piece? Mom mentioned it a few weeks ago. She asked if I thought you'd be okay with it, and I told her she should ask you directly. And I said yes, apparently, though I don't remember them filming that interview. You were probably in one of your research zones. You get very focused when you're working on your thesis." I laughed. "Fair point. How do you think it came across?" "Honest, hopeful, real." Those were good words for where our family was at this point. Not healed, not back to normal, because normal had been the problem, but honest, hopeful, and real. The past 6 months had been a strange journey of rebuilding relationships while maintaining the boundaries I'd established. My parents had started therapy, both couples counseling and family therapy that included phone sessions with me and Mia when we were available. They'd made concrete changes in how they approached both of us. Mom now asked about my research, my friends, my graduate school experience with the same interest she'd always shown in Mia's life. She remembered details from previous conversations and followed up on things I'd told her I was worried about or excited about. It felt awkward at first, like she was performing interest rather than feeling it, but gradually it started to feel more natural. Dad had started including me in conversations about family finances, asking for my input on decisions that would affect both Mia and me. He'd also started acknowledging my achievements publicly, sharing news about my scholarship work on his social media, mentioning my research to his business associates, treating my graduate school acceptance like something worth celebrating rather than just expecting. Most importantly, they'd stopped comparing us. No more comments about how I was naturally independent while Mia needed more support. No more different standards for similar behaviors. When Mia changed her major, they were disappointed but supportive. When she got her first job, they celebrated it the same way they'd celebrated my academic achievements. The changes weren't dramatic or overnight, but they were consistent. And consistency, I was learning, was more valuable than grand gestures. I was still living in my own apartment, still maintaining financial independence, still building a life that didn't require their approval or support. But I was also cautiously re-engaging with them, testing whether the changes I was seeing were sustainable. 3 weeks after the follow-up news story aired, I got a call that changed everything. "Sarah, it's Dr. Martinez from the Biomedical Engineering Department. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course, Professor. I wanted to give you a heads up about something before it becomes public. Your research on cardiac tissue regeneration has caught the attention of some major pharmaceutical companies. Specifically, there's a company in Boston that wants to offer you a position after you complete your master's degree." My heart stopped. "What kind of position?" "Lead researcher on a project that's directly related to your thesis work. Full benefits, significant salary, and the opportunity to continue your research with unlimited funding." That's incredible. There's more. They're also interested in funding a fellowship program based on your scholarship model, supporting graduate students who are financing their own education while conducting high-level research. I sat down hard in my desk chair, trying to process this information. Less than a year ago, I was taking the bus to my graduation while my parents shopped for cars. Now I had multiple companies interested in my research, and organizations wanting to replicate the scholarship program that had grown out of my public family meltdown. "Dr. Martinez, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. This is the kind of opportunity that could launch a significant career in biomedical research." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment trying to process how dramatically my life had changed. Not just the career opportunities, but the relationships, the self-perception, the understanding of my own worth. A year ago, I was a student who worked multiple jobs and accepted family neglect as normal. Today, I was a graduate researcher with career opportunities most people could only dream of, a healthy relationship with my sister, and parents who were actively working to become people worthy of my trust. But the most important change was internal. I was no longer the daughter who accepted less because asking for more felt ungrateful. I was no longer the person who protected other people's comfort at the expense of my own truth. I was no longer someone who believed that love meant settling for an equality. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the job offer. "Sarah, that's incredible." Mom's excitement sounded genuine, unforced. "Boston, what an adventure. Are you considering it?" Dad asked. "I am. It's an amazing opportunity." "We're so proud of you," Dad said, and for the first time in my life, I believed him without reservation. "Will you be okay with me moving across the country?" "We'll miss you terribly," Mom said, "but we want you to pursue every opportunity you've earned. You've worked so hard for this." It was the right answer, the supportive answer, the answer that prioritized my interests over their preferences. It was the kind of parenting I'd needed my whole life and was finally starting to receive. "There's something else," I said. "They want to fund a fellowship program based on the scholarship model. They want me to help develop it and oversee it as part of my position." "You mean your story isn't just changing our family?" Mom said softly. "It's changing systems that affect hundreds of students." "It looks that way." There was a pause, and then Dad said something that surprised me. "Sarah, I owe you an apology that goes beyond our family dynamics." "What do you mean?" "I mean that for 22 years, we didn't just fail you as parents. We failed to recognize that you were going to be someone who changes the world. We were so focused on managing our day-to-day parenting that we missed the fact that we were raising a daughter who would grow up to create opportunities for other people who felt forgotten." "Dad, I'm serious. Look at what's happened in less than a year. You've created a scholarship program, influenced university policies, inspired other families to examine their dynamics, and now you're being recruited by major companies while creating opportunities for other students. You didn't just succeed despite our neglect. You turned our failure into a catalyst for helping others. I was crying now, something I'd managed to avoid through most of our reconciliation process. I never wanted to be an example, I said. I just wanted to be valued in my own family. And in fighting for that, Mom said, you ended up helping countless other people fight for their own value too. 3 months later, I accepted the position in Boston. My parents drove me to the airport, both of them, together, making my departure a priority in their schedule rather than something that had to be coordinated around other plans. At security, Mom hugged me with the kind of fierce love I'd watched her give Mia for years. I'm proud of the woman you've become, she whispered. Not despite the challenges we put you through, but because of how you chose to respond to them. Dad's hug was equally genuine. You've taught us what real strength looks like, he said, and what real love requires. As I walked toward my gate, I turned back to see them waving, both crying, both genuinely sad to see me go, but genuinely proud of where I was going. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to rebuild relationships after they've been fundamentally broken, I can tell you this. It's possible, but it requires everyone involved to be willing to do the work of becoming better people. It requires the person who was hurt to stay open to change, and it requires the people who caused the hurt to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to different behavior. It doesn't always work. Sometimes people aren't capable of change or aren't willing to do the work required. Sometimes the damage is too extensive to repair. But sometimes, if you're lucky and persistent and brave enough to demand better, you can build something new and healthier from the ruins of what was broken. My name is Sarah Chin Martinez. I graduated summa cum laude from UC San Diego with a degree in biomedical engineering. I funded my entire education through part-time work while maintaining a 3.98 GPA. I took the bus to my own graduation because my parents prioritized buying my sister a Tesla over attending my ceremony. And that bus ride changed everything. Not just for me, but for my family, for hundreds of students who've benefited from scholarship programs, for universities that have recognized the need to support students without family financial backing, and for families who've been inspired to examine their own dynamics. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you do with your life. Sometimes the people who fail you become the reason you succeed. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those same people can learn to do better, and you can build something beautiful from the ashes of what was broken. That's my story. And if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through 9 chapters of family dysfunction and healing and growth, then I want you to know your story matters too. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Your value doesn't decrease because someone else can't recognize it. And if you're fighting to be valued in your own family, in your own relationships, in your own life, keep fighting. You deserve to be celebrated, not just tolerated. You deserve to be prioritized, not just accommodated. Don't settle for love that feels conditional. Don't accept inequality disguised as care. You are worth fighting for, especially if you have to be the one doing the fighting.